This time on Psychic Investigators. A woman fails to show up for work.
Belfry Police Department.
My wife is missing.
Her husband says she's left him. But her family doesn't buy it.
We knew something terrible was wrong.
Then a psychic sees something terrifying.
She's not missing. She's dead.
Will the police take her vision seriously?
Some people believe it, some people don't.
Can the psychic help the police solve the mystery of what happened to Jennifer McCrady? Along the Ohio River, reminders of the booming coal industry float by the town of Belpre, Ohio. It's a quiet working-class town. Families have lived here for generations. An unlikely place for the drama about to unfold with a phone call to the local police, Thursday afternoon, September 19th, 1996.
Belfry Police Department.
Hi, this is True McCrady.
Uh-huh.
My wife is missing.
I'll have an officer come in and give you a call up there and talk to you.
Okay.
The call comes from Ohio State Trooper Jack McCrady from his post in Marietta. Trooper McCrady and his wife Jennifer, a nurse, are well known around Belpre. A seemingly happy family. They have 2 small children and are very close to Jennifer's parents.
The greatest thing for Jenny was being a mom. She just dearly loved those 2 boys.
Jack McCrady is a respected state trooper with 5 years service. He was named the county's Trooper of the Year. He's also a familiar face at the Belpre Police Department. State troopers often use the office when they make arrests in the area.
When I worked at the police station, the State Highway Patrol would normally bring people in there, so I got to know Jack from coming in there with people that he's arrested or doing an accident report. They would come there and use our office.
The city of Belpre is very small, 6,000 or 7,000 people, an 11-man department. He knows everybody that works there. He was born and raised in the area.
Detective Sergeant Dave Garvey is assigned to the case. At first, the detective treats McCrady's call about his wife as routine.
Husbands and wives have problems. If any police department actively pursued every missing husband and or wife in the first 3 or 4 hours, probably wouldn't get much work done.
3 hours later, when Trooper McCrady returns home, he calls the Belpre police again. He confirms Detective Garvey's initial thoughts.
She is apparently not missing.
Okay.
She's cleaned out pretty much everything what she owned.
Okay.
Wedding rings were laying on the kitchen counter. Apparently she's all right.
But is she? When Jennifer's parents hear the news, they're shocked. Unlike the police, they refuse to believe Jack's story.
And he says, she packed her clothes and took $3,000 and left. Jenny would not leave on her own and not tell us that she was going someplace. We knew something terrible was wrong.
"12 hours later, Belpre police find Jennifer's red Blazer abandoned in the park along the Ohio River. There's no sign of the 31-year-old mother. But a detailed search turns up nothing. No blood, no purse, no sign of a struggle. It's a mystery. It's as if Jennifer McCrady just vanished into thin air. Garvey zeroes in on her husband.
All Jack was saying was that he came home from work, she's gone, I think she's with somebody else.
Garvey talks to her family, her friends, checks her bank accounts, her phone records. Nothing turns up. Jack's story about her secret lover looks shaky.
Co-workers did not believe that she was seeing anybody or had ever seen anybody at all. Her mom and dad just were emphatic that she would never, ever leave. her best friends said she would never leave the boys.
Jennifer was a very sweet, heartfelt girl. Everybody liked Jennifer. My first thoughts were, well, maybe had she been in an accident, something had happened, because it just wouldn't be her just not show up or not contact her family.
My thoughts were probably the same as everyone else's. Something just didn't sound right.
But what? 5 days after Jennifer McCrady disappeared, the entire town is concerned, but police have no real leads.
We waited and waited, and we just wondered whether we were even going to, if they were ever going to be able to find her.
As the pressure mounts, dispatcher Moni Tanner, who took the first call from Jack McCrady, makes an unusual suggestion. She remembers Washington County had used a psychic from Pittsburgh to help on one of their cases a few years earlier.
Well, I figured we didn't have any leads, so what could it hurt to try? If she could help with the case and give us something to go on, we weren't going anywhere as it was. The detective did not want anything to do with it, but he said if I wanted to call, to go ahead and do it.
Everyone's looking to me to do something, make something happen. I have no leads. You end up sitting at the desk and you really don't know what you're going to do next. I want to use the training that I've been given to solve a crime. I didn't want to be embarrassed by looking at someone and says, well, I'm going to call a psychic. I just didn't want to be laughed at.
Georgia Rudolph, a psychic who was living in Pittsburgh, has been helping the police with cases for 20 years. It is a phone call that will change everything.
One of the first things she said to me was, we have a missing person. And I said, I'm going to tell you, she's not missing, she's dead. There's more to the human being than what you see. It's mind, body, spirit. Everybody has their own vibrational pattern. There have been cases where I have felt like I was almost a part of the situation. There have been other cases where I have felt that the deceased, it's never happened with a missing person because they're not going to get into my mind. The deceased has practically entered my mind or is standing right there. And they feed me the information. Or I feel like I'm experiencing what that person experienced at the end of their life. One of the ways I know if a person has passed is by the intensity of the vibration that I'm getting. If it's a low, more intent vibration, then they're still very much alive and on the earth. If it's a high-pitched vibration, then they've passed. This lady was dead.
When I learned the information, it creeped me out.
And Moni came back and said, you need to talk with Georgia. And the first day I said, no, I don't. Some people believe it, some people don't. So for probably maybe a day, I didn't call her.
5 days after Jennifer McCrady disappeared, Detective Garvey still has nothing. So against his better instincts, he calls the psychic.
In the conversation I had with Georgia on the phone, she said Jennifer was dead.
He said, are you sure? And I said, yes. And he said, what happened to her? She was shot in the back of the head once. Then he asked me, do you know who did this? And I said, yes. The man you are looking for would remind you of a lumberjack. His physique, not his face. He said, do you know what he does for a living? And I said, like a cop?
The detective's mind is racing. Could the psychic be talking about Jack McCrady? At 6'2" and 200 pounds, the cop is built like a lumberjack. But if Jennifer McCrady is dead, where is she?
I told them I don't know where she is, but I can tell you how to get there. I said, you want to get on the main road going outside of your town, and you stay on that road and you go south, and you're going to come to a town. It wasn't clear, but you're going to see a road. And the numbers to it are 298. And you're going to see a dirt gravel road that goes up. And you walk up that road, and you're going to find the body of Jennifer McCrady.
A psychic with no prior knowledge of the case has just told the detective that a heavily built cop killed Jennifer McCrady with a bullet to the head. She's also given him mysterious clues about where to find the body. Could the respected state trooper really have killed his wife? The word of a psychic is not enough for the detective.
South of town, 298. Had to look up. I really didn't know what that meant.
Then, 24 hours later, there's a call to the Belpre police station that will blow the investigation wide open.
The following Monday, after I talked with Georgia on the phone, a local citizen came to the office. They told me that they were south of town. They saw a state highway patrol car coming down a hill on Township 298. And she said, the look he gave me, you just need to look into that. And I knew the area that she was talking about, Torch, was south of town, near Township 298.
Could this be the trail the psychic described? The similarities are so strong that Garvey, still skeptical, decides to check it out. He drives south of Belpre on the road leading to Torch, Ohio. At Township Road 298, he finds an abandoned oil field road. This is the road where the caller had seen the trooper's car.
And unable to access the oil field road, you have to go up a hill. So if you actually went ahead and sat on 298 and looked up the oil field road, you're looking up a hill. I walked the road back probably 150 to 175 yards. I noticed what looked like to me a fresh grave. It was an area in size about 4 feet wide, 3 or 4 feet long. It was freshly dug, but it was very shallow. I thought about the possibilities. I went and I called Jeff Severs.
105 North Avenue, 52.
Jeff Severs is a detective at the Washington County Sheriff's Office. The road is in his jurisdiction. His first question, why is a trooper on a dirt road?
Troopers don't go off pavement, is our saying. The troopers stay on the pavement because they don't want to get their cars dirty. So when I heard that information, that's an immediate red flag up to me.
As both men head to what looks like a gravesite, Garvey tells Severs about the psychic's eerie visions.
I can recall talking with Jeff about what Georgia had said. And we both joked about it. Jeff took his fingers and just dug into the dirt. And he came up with a blue nylon slick surface. And we moved a little bit more dirt away, and we found a zipper. Local farmers do not put cows, pigs, hogs were dead animals in a zippered bag.
The zippered bag is, in fact, a sleeping bag. Fearing the worst, Sievers immediately cordons off the area and calls in the crime scene unit.
We dug into the point where we got to the sleeping bag, and then we slowly excavated around it until we, could unzip the sleeping bag and see that there was a human body. We uncovered and unzipped the bag. A white plastic bag had been placed over her head. We removed it. It was the body of Jennifer McCrady.
A missing persons case is now a homicide. The question is, how did Jennifer die?
She had a gunshot wound to her head.
It looked like it was a single shot to the right side of her head, just above her right ear, and it didn't look like there was an exit wound at that time. She was wearing a pink pajama bottom and a sleeping shirt.
And her feet were bare, and the bottom of her feet were clean. Common sense would say that she was shot at her house.
From the location of the body to the way she was killed, it seems the psychic was correct.
I never doubted it. Jennifer McCrady wanted to be found.
The doorbell rang about 2:30 in the morning, October 2nd. And it was the sheriff and the police, and they said, "We found her." It was a closure. To at least know, because sometimes people don't even get that.
At the highway patrol post in Marietta, Garvey delivers the bad news to Jennifer's husband.
Jack broke down, dropped his head, covered his eyes, and he sobbed and he cried. And I left the room for about 5 seconds, and I got him some towels to wipe his eyes. And I handed them to him, and he wiped his face, and he handed them back to me, and I looked down, they were bone dry.
Something else disturbing. McCrady never asks where his wife was found or how she was killed. Is he the cop the psychic said committed the crime? The detective now believes he is.
We talked to him and told him that he needed to tell us what had happened, and Jack just wouldn't say anything at all. And finally, he said he'd like to talk to a lawyer.
Jack McCrady is relieved of duty. The grieving husband is now the prime suspect.
We were investigating one of our own now for a murder, and it was really upsetting that it was not only his wife, but a mother of 2 small children.
He has some training. He knows how interviews work. He knows how tricks work when you talk to people. So you have to treat him differently.
Armed with a search warrant, investigators search the McCrady home and discover crucial evidence. Hidden in the ceiling rafters of the garage, they find all of Jennifer's personal belongings.
We also found a gun. That was a .357 Magnum gun, which could have been the caliber that was used to kill her. And somehow, someone had tampered with the barrel of the gun so that we couldn't match the bullet that was found in her head to that gun.
Also, out in a shed outside of the residence, we found a shovel. The dirt on it came back with the same consistency of the dirt found at the gravesite.
We never found a crime scene or a place where she was shot. But the evidence that we found in the house was very crucial.
3 days after finding Jennifer's body, police charged Jack McCrady with murdering his wife. He pleads innocent. 18 months later, on October 20th, the trial begins.
The prosecution of Jack McCrady was a circumstantial evidence case. There was no confession from Mr. McCrady. There was no eyewitness who was able to take the stand and describe for the jury how he or she saw the crime being committed. The case generated a very high level of attention in the community. First of all, again, the nature of the crime, the tragedy of a young mother being killed and the 2 children being without their mother. Added to that, the fact that the defendant was a law enforcement officer. And I think by and large in this community, law enforcement officers still have a fair amount of respect of the people. And this really shook that belief.
Yet the discovery of Jennifer's body allows the prosecution to argue that Jack has lied about his wife's disappearance from day one.
When the body was located, she was wearing the kind of things she would have worn to bed. It's not something that a woman would wear when she was running off for a rendezvous with a secret lover. That was obviously a crucial piece of evidence.
The trial also revealed that Jack lied about his marriage. A co-worker testified Jennifer had told her that she was planning to leave Jack and take the kids. The prosecution argued that on the night of September 19th, Jennifer and Jack fought over her decision. Jack wasn't going to let that happen. He took his gun, and while his kids slept in their room, he shot his wife in the back of the head. To catch any blood loss, he put a white plastic bag over her head. To move the body, he stuffed her inside a blue sleeping bag. Using her red blazer, he drove to the abandoned oil field road outside of town. His plan, they argued, was to bury her there temporarily. Later, he would return and move the body to a place where it would never be found. To create a false trail, he ditched the car at the Belpre Park and returned home to his 2 sleeping boys. The jury in Marietta, Ohio, deliberated for 14 hours before reaching its verdict. Guilty. Psychic Georgia Rudolph's amazing visions helped to put a cold-blooded killer behind bars.
Georgia's information made a world of difference. It solved the case.
Without that information and the resultant discovery of Jen's body, I don't think there would have even been a charge filed against Mr. McCrady. It would have been simply an unsolved missing persons case.
Following George's guidelines or thoughts, whatever you want to say, led us to finding Jennifer. We found Jennifer. We found the bad guy. He goes to jail, and the family feels better.
A psychic's insight not only helped to solve this case, but helped to change some skeptics into believers.
People did not want to believe that Georgia could do it or a psychic could do it, but after it was over with, there was different feelings.
Not only did she say where the body would be discovered, she said she was dead before anyone else had reached that conclusion. And then she also said, and she described who had killed her, and then she said, and you might not want to hear this, but the person who killed her was a cop. And so all of those bits of information, I think, were remarkable. Now, looking back, it all, yeah, well, sure, everybody knows that. But when she made those statements, that was not something that most people believed.
There is some ironic coincidences there. When you talk about the name early in the investigation, that the man that killed Jennifer was a very strong, well-built man, and she actually used the name of a lumberjack, and ironically, Jack's name is Jack.
How Georgia Rudolph acquired the information, I have no idea. It is, I simply can't explain how she was able to provide that information, but thank goodness that she did.
From the beginning, Georgia never questioned her insights. For her, it was always about helping people.
I got a wonderful letter from the prosecuting attorney. He made it very clear to me that the people of Washington County owed me a debt of gratitude.
For Jennifer's mother, Finding her daughter's killer is what she hoped for, but it can't heal the heartbreak of losing a child.
If it hadn't have been for Georgia, we'd have never have gotten Jenny back. I don't know how they do it. It's just a special blessing, I guess, that they've got that they can do it. She's my very best friend. I talk to her. I still talk to her. People think I'm crazy, but nobody knows I'm talking to her. She can hear me, I'm sure.
This time on Psychic Investigators, a young woman is abducted in broad daylight.
Where is she? Who has her?
Police think it could be murder.
There was blood on the handgun.
But no one knows for sure.
You could hear the buzzing before we saw the flash.
Until a psychic relives the crime.
That's when she leaped into my body. She was so terrified.
Will the psychic help to solve the mystery of what happened to the flower girl? Denton, Texas, on the outskirts of Dallas-Fort Worth, a university town, a town that likes to party, where booze and bars can sometimes mean trouble, like the trouble that erupted late afternoon, July 1st, 1996.
A girl that I know was kidnapped. Big white burly guy in a black late model Chevy pickup. Yes. I took off with her. It's about 5 minutes ago.
You'd get calls like this basically every weekend when the bars were open to 2 a.m. in the morning. The two witnesses, patrolmen, saw that both of them had been drinking and didn't believe what they said and thought possibly that it was just a domestic disturbance.
The witnesses know the woman they saw kidnapped. She's 36-year-old Diana Goldston, a local photographer who also makes extra money selling roses in the clubs and bars around Denton. People call her the Flower Girl.
She would give her shirt off of her back to you if she felt you needed it more than she did.
Diana is also a part-time bartender at the Red Derby, the location of the abduction.
The owner of the Red Derby called and said that something had happened to my sister.
I got a call from my daughter. She said that Diana was taken from the street and kidnapped.
The witnesses gave the police the license plate number of the truck. They trace it to the address of Carrie Griffin, ex-wife of John Robert, J.R. Griffin, a known felon from California on parole.
Very, very strong, very muscular guy. He scared people.
A rookie detective is sent out to question J.R. Griffin's ex-wife. Carrie Griffin says that her ex-husband had been at the house on the day in question, and he had a woman with him. From Carrie's description, the detective assumes the woman is Diana Goldston.
Wrote in his report she was with J.R. Griffin and appeared okay.
Satisfied that it may be a simple domestic dispute, the police put the case to one side. But it was not okay. 10 days go by, and still no word from Diana. Her mother desperately wants answers.
They weren't taking it seriously, and I said, she's missing, she's gone. Something's wrong. Please help me.
The police revisit the case, and Detective Dave Stewart is put in charge.
They'd already started it in motion, talked to a few people, but then when I came in, we started having to interview all the other witnesses.
Also assigned to the case, Detective Kenny Kirkland re-interviews Carrie Griffin. His experience tells him she knows more than she's saying.
Indeed, that was not the whole truth, that there was more to the story.
Kirkland gets her to admit that she was scared of her ex-husband and that the woman with JR wasn't Diana Goldston, but his girlfriend, Jeanette Cox.
That Jeanette Cox was there with him, that Diana Goldston was not, and that J.R. Griffin had blood on him.
You gonna talk to them since?
The story Carrie Griffin tells breaks the case wide open. Carrie Griffin says JR asked her neighbor for help. The truck was stuck at the lake. The lake is Lake Ray Roberts, a heavily wooded 6,000-acre state park just outside of Denton. What was JR doing up there? And why did he have blood on his shirt? The neighbor takes Kirkland to the spot where JR was stuck.
When we first walked up to the area, we could see a jacket hanging in a tree that had blood on it. We could see the trail where a body was dragged. You could hear the buzzing before we saw the flies. And the blowflies were just all on the top of it. They're also called death flies. There was a pool of blood and body fluids. There was lots of blood there.
The police bring in dogs trained at detecting human remains.
Cadaver dogs hit on that area that we were. They hit on the jacket.
They gather the evidence at Lake Ray Roberts and compare it to DNA from Diana Goldston.
We matched all of these things to the blood that was on the ground, to DNA that we had gathered from Diana Goldston's hair that she left in a brush at her house.
And it all matches.
We knew that that's where Diana had been before he moved her.
Even without her body, the police are now convinced the flower girl is dead.
I went out in my backyard and screamed and yelled and cried and talked to God. But it really didn't help. She was gone.
Warrants are issued. In J.R. Griffin's house, the police find a shotgun and a .38 revolver. Traces of blood are found on the revolver. In the pickup truck, the police also find trace elements of blood.
We were able to get DNA from that, which would match us up to Diana Goldston.
In the state of Texas, without a body, police cannot lay a murder charge. But they do have enough evidence to charge J.R. Griffin and his girlfriend Jeanette Cox with aggravated kidnapping. But where is Diana Goldston? And what exactly happened to her? All of Denton wants to know. The police drag the lake. There's a massive ground search.
It was very emotional for the whole town as well as the police department. We wanted justice. All of us did. We left no stone unturned.
And still, nothing. Weeks, then 3 months go by, and with JR and his girlfriend not talking, the police are at a dead end. A colleague suggests a psychic who had worked with police in a nearby county.
Police officers are cynical by nature, and we don't believe anything that anybody tells us, much less a psychic that tells you things from the dead or from other places.
Despite his skepticism, the detective gives the psychic a call.
He wanted to know if I would be willing to work on this young woman who was missing. And he said, would you be willing to come to Denton, Texas?
Carol Pate has worked with police around the U.S. on many cases. She uses a method she calls psychometry.
That's holding an object, a photograph. It's kind of like tuning in a radio station for me. Once I've got that signature frequency of that individual, then I can become one with them. So I'm sort of them for that time frame. Then I can see and feel and know.
But will the psychic be able to see what happened to the flower girl?
Pretty much floored all of us. We were shocked.
Hey, you! Where's my money?
A woman abducted outside a Texas bar has been missing for weeks, presumed dead. Police bring in psychic Carol Pate from her home in Arkansas. Can she see what the police cannot?
We were very frustrated, but we needed some closure for the family and for us in the police department.
In the squad room, the detectives put the psychic to the test.
We did not give Carol Pate any information whatsoever. We figured if she was truly who she said she was, that she would be able to do these things. We got together several pictures, and some of them were people not involved in the crime, and some were people involved in it. We had not released any of the pictures of people in the press.
So I did each photograph. The girl was scared to death. She was murdered.
All of us in the room were just silent.
This one is the murderer. He was heavy into drugs, and that he had zero conscience, none. This one is his girlfriend. And she was there at the time of the murder.
We were shocked for the fact that she was able to take just pictures and tell us what each person did and what their part was in that crime. She just reaffirmed that. I don't know of anybody that can do that.
What else can the psychic see? Without telling her anything, Detective Kirkland drives Carol to the scene of the abduction, the parking lot of the Red Derby Bar.
This young girl, I saw her in front of a nightclub, and she sold flowers. This was where I felt a lot of violence here. This was where the abduction took place. He believed this girl had stolen money from him.
Where's my money?
She was so terrified. And then that's when she leaped into my body. I was going through the struggle that she was going through. And all of a sudden, I'm shot.
She said she could feel it, just like as if she was Diana Goldston. I can feel the searing heat. I can feel that I'm bleeding. That is a possibility. The two witnesses, I remembered that they said a shot had been fired, but no one had said that Diana Goldston was shot. We were going down toward the lake. As we drove by one area, she said, this part here has something to do with Diana Goldston.
Still channeling the spirit of Diana, the psychic calls out directions as she claims to relive Diana Goldston's last moments.
She's bleeding heavily, and I look to either side of me, and I see a woman, and I see a man to my left side, and these people are fighting her and holding her.
She said, I can feel what Diana Goldston feels. They're hitting me, and they're keeping me down, and I'm begging for my life.
And she said, turn to the right. Here, turn left.
She leads the detective to Lake Ray Roberts.
She said, this is where it occurred. This is where Diana Goldston lost her life. This lake is huge. Lake Ray Roberts is a big place. And to be able to narrow it down to one place, it's pretty astounding.
I feel the man and the girl taking her out of the truck. There's a jacket, and he takes it off, and he throws it on a limb in a tree.
Shocked that she was able to do that.
And I saw him dragging my body through the woods. and they just lay me down. And I guess they thought I was gonna just bleed to death there. And they walk away. And then I feel them coming back. And the man, he stomps my throat with his big boot. I die.
How could the psychic know so much? Carol Pate not only confirmed where police believe Diana Goldston died, but she offers insight into how she died.
I can't explain that.
Forensics have given some of the details in the case, but with J.R. Griffin and Jeanette Cox saying nothing, Carol Pate is the only one to paint a full picture of Diana's last moments alive.
Carol left me some drawings that depicted where she believed Diana Goldston had been taken and laid down a final resting place.
There was some graffiti close to a bridge, and the graffiti, that was done like in red. That S was like in red. And there was a cross, and then that Y, and there was this barrel, and I felt like she at one point was placed either in the barrel or around this barrel. Basically, when I draw these pictures, it's what I'm seeing in my head, what the picture that flashes in my head, period. And I try to transpose that picture in my head onto the piece of paper. And I try to get as much detail as possible.
But 5 months after the Flower Girl's abduction, there's still no sign of Diana's body. The trial of J.R. Griffin begins. He pleads not guilty.
He believed that the police could not touch him, that he was invincible, that nobody could get him. Everything that we gathered together was a circumstantial case, but it was a good enough case because we'd pieced it together.
Leanne Breeding is the prosecutor.
Our goal was to get him convicted and have him spend as much time in the penitentiary as the law allowed. Without a body, it's hard to prove an exact cause of death that stands up on appeal. And so you take the route where you think you have the better case for the evidence. In this case, it was the aggravated kidnapping.
To the end, J.R. Griffin maintains his innocence. But the jury finds him guilty, and he's sentenced to 40 years.
In Texas, juries decide the punishment. And for him to be sentenced to life imprisonment on an aggravated kidnapping case, that's the most he could get.
You know, instead of being just this flower girl that he swatted away, suddenly now she was important to the jury. And it was this one person he wasn't even afraid of and thought couldn't do anything that put him behind bars permanently.
We asked him again if he would just tell us where she was, that we would not pursue murder charges and he could not get the death penalty in the state of Texas. We wanted to find the body of Diana Goldston to add some closure to her family. And his response to myself and David Stewart at that time was that you will never find the body of Diana Goldston.
With J.R. Griffin in prison and his girlfriend Jeanette Cox saying nothing while she awaits her trial, the police have only the visions of a psychic to explain how Diana died. But that was about to change.
I remembered what Carol Pate told me. I remembered it all. It indeed did come to be true.
In Denton, Texas, J.R. Griffin has been found guilty of the abduction of Diana Goldston. The police are sure she's dead, but J.R. won't reveal what happened or where her body is.
So about 3 o'clock, I wrote J.R. a letter while he was in prison to tell me what he did with Diana, and he wrote me an 11-page letter back, kind of called me a bunch of names, and keeps denying it. He won't talk about it. He keeps saying it's somebody else that did it.
I think J.R. Griffin is one of the most evil men you would ever meet. Any man that has the ability to put closure for a family and he just totally ignores them, he's evil.
I even wrote to Griffin in prison. In his letters to me, he said, I'll probably die in here, and I thought, good. He denied everything, saying his friend Cox knew more than she was telling.
Then, 2 years after the abduction, an unexpected development, and the mystery of how Diana died is finally solved. In exchange for a reduced sentence and no trial, Griffin's accomplice talks.
Jeanette told us everything that we didn't know because she was actually there. And she gave details that only a person that was present would know what happened.
So he was wanting to go to Denton and told me he had quite some money. And he just a couple days beforehand, he mentioned about someone stealing his wallet.
Hey, where's my money?
JR killed the wrong person because it was all over $400 that someone had taken out of his wallet. It wasn't Diane that stole the money, but she died as a result of something else that somebody else did.
Diana Goldston had never done anything to J.R. Griffin. She died for nothing.
And he just yanked her up and started shoving her towards the truck. At that time, I hear the gun go off, and I'm very scared. And he says, get her in the truck.
Get her in there.
And my reaction was just that I've heard this before from Carol.
Shot. I can't remember anymore of the trip because I'm struggling with her to keep her down. He's telling me to keep her down. I punched her once or twice, maybe 3 times.
I'd heard this also from Carol Pate. She told me this is what happened.
And then when he got to the lake where he dumped her,
I helped him lift her legs up. She's still breathing. I was walking back to the truck, and out the corner of my eye, I see him drag her up further under the tree area, and it looked like he stepped on her neck. Just kind of smashed it like a cigarette butt. And I acted like I didn't see him. I'm so afraid.
what this does, it sets the wheels in motion. If we ever find Diana,
J.R. Griffin can and most likely will be tried for murder and be put to death.
But can she tell the police where to find Diana's body and seal J.R. Griffin's fate?
Do you have any idea where she may be?
No.
For making the deal, Jeanette Cox receives a sentence of 20 years in prison. Eerily, Jeanette's account closely mirrors the psychic's visions of the crime. And what about Carol Pate's drawings of Diana's burial place? Detective Kenny Kirkland is hopeful.
Carol Pate had gotten several things right in dealing with this case. And so I've kept those drawings, so when we do find the body, I want to be able to compare it to what Carol drew on this paper.
It is probably one of the harder things to do, is to locate a body, because that energy is dead. The physical energy is dead. So I'm having to pick up on the remnants of what was there psychically.
Carol Pate obviously has some special gifts to be able to do things that a normal person cannot do. She was able to tell us things about this case she knew nothing about. It was pretty phenomenal that she was able to do that.
For Detective Dave Stewart, the case never closed.
I need to find Diane before I retire. That is my one goal in life, I hope, as an officer, is to put this case to rest.
I would love for my mother and my daughter and me to have a place to go and pay our respects to her. That would be amazing.
I wanted a body, I wanted a funeral. I wanted a place that I could go talk to her instead of her picture.
I feel Diana will eventually be found given time. I know that the family needs closure. They need to be able to say goodbye. And who knows, maybe I'll have a part in it.
This time on Psychic Investigators, a young mother vanishes.
Send me a sign. Where are you?
And the police can't find her.
No leads came, nothing.
Until a psychic tunes into her spirit.
Little blips of things that were coming through.
And claims to see what no one else can.
Could feel her getting dizzy, heart fluttering.
But are his visions too late?
I didn't feel she was alive.
Is the damage already done?
Wasn't adding up. People involved, they got away with something.
In the shadow of New York City sits Sayreville, New Jersey. Once an industrial powerhouse, by 1996, a bedroom community. Not only do commuters cross the bridge from the big city, but drugs and the damage they do also make their way to Sayreville. On June 1st, 22-year-old single mom Nicole Roas heads out for a night on the town with friends. The former NYU student lives at home with her parents, leaving her 16-month-old daughter Dylan in their care.
She was a good mother. I thought, oh, she's going to be asking me to babysit all the time. And I was just out of all that stuff. And I only had one child, and I didn't want to get back into that. And she didn't. Maybe once a month, you know, she'd ask me to babysit. And always after Dylan was already sleeping at night.
But when Nicole fails to return home that night, her parents know something is very wrong. Recently, Nicole has been hanging out with a bad crowd, with a taste for booze and drugs.
I knew that if she didn't come home and didn't let us know something was wrong, that she couldn't.
The next morning, Nicole's father, Jerry, now deceased, heads straight to the Sayreville police to file a missing persons report. Detective Jim Novak is put in charge of the case.
Parents know if something's really wrong with their child. So what do you think? Mr. Rokas came out and said that I think she's dead.
Before you suspect foul play, you try and rule out all of the other common things that normally you find in a missing persons case, especially an adult. There's really no crime to be a missing person.
A description of Nicole and her vehicle, a black 1980 Chevy Malibu, are fed into the National Crime Information Computer System.
To see if any other police department in the United States ever had contact with that license plate. And there was no one that ran her license plate, or her car wasn't found somewhere and run by the police.
Jerry Arokas gives Detective Novak details about his daughter. She didn't like to drive her own car, especially at night. And he wasn't too fond of her choice of friends.
He didn't particularly care for her boyfriend, Michael Reed.
Detective Novak knows Mike Reed. Reed is a suspect in a recent string of car burglaries.
I always thought he was the best liar I've ever met. He would lie to me and smile as he did it. It was almost like Charles Manson type thing.
But her father's biggest fear is that his daughter's recent drug habit, heroin, might have something to do with her disappearance. Detectives start by interviewing some of Nicole's friends, Eric Nordling, Todd Connors, and Mike Reed.
Detectives went into the house to check the house for Nicole. Other detectives interviewed the three occupants, Eric, Todd, and Michael.
And everyone denied having any further contact other than seeing Nicole leave that night to go what they called out to several bars to do some drinking.
As we were leaving, Michael called to me. He said, Mr. Novak, I want you to know, I didn't love Nicole. We were only friends. I looked at Detective Sergeant Sprague, and simultaneously we said to each other, she's dead. And the reason we felt that way is because he used the past tense, and there was no reason at this point to think of Nicole as anything else than in the present. Unless there was.
But what? There's no evidence to back up a feeling. They continue to pursue the missing persons case, contacting local hospitals, checking towing reports and connecting with state police. 2 days go by, and there is no sign of Nicole or her car.
At this point in the investigation, we had no leads.
Once you don't come home for a number of days and no one hears from you for a number of days, now this person is really maybe not just a missing person on their own account, but maybe in fact some kind of foul play may have occurred here.
I would go out on the back porch every night and just look around and say, just send me a sign, something. Where are you? I know you're out here somewhere.
Desperate for any answers, the family is willing to try anything.
My uncle Walt Werner worked for the Hackensack Police Department, and he suggested a psychic that the police force sometimes used.
Frank St. James lives in New Jersey and has a reputation for finding missing persons.
I'm like a human satellite or something, going anywhere. Little blips of things I could draw in, get real close. Sometimes they come really quick in flashes. It's like looking through their eyes.
But his one rule? No immediate family members in the session. Diane Macaluso, Pat Arokas's best friend, goes in her place.
My husband and I took a tape recorder with us to record the session, and we took a picture of Nicole with us.
And what the picture shows him, no one really wants to hear.
I tell you, I don't have a good feeling about it. She did expire sometime Sunday morning.
Single mother Nicole Arokas of Sayreville, New Jersey has been missing for 3 days. Psychic Frank St. James says she's dead.
She did expire sometime Sunday morning.
Oh, my heart sank when I heard that because I was still hoping that maybe she just went off with friends.
The psychic claims to be picking up images of Nicole from the night she went out with friends.
I pick up some drugs Saturday. The turnpike is off of there on one of those little side roads. She's not moving. She's not too far from home. I do feel something by Thursday.
Is the psychic right? Will they find Nicole by Thursday?
I didn't have hope that she was alive. I knew that when she didn't contact us and didn't come home, I knew it. But I just had to find her.
The Arokas invite the psychic to their home. Maybe here he can get a clearer picture of where their daughter might be. Left alone, he moves through the house. It's in the kitchen where Frank claims to connect with Nicole's spirit.
Nicole started to come through really easy. It looked like I was flying up above, near water, a dirt road, bridges, cattails, or her car in the marsh. One of the wheels was in the water. A feeling of closed in. I felt that if I was standing 25 feet away from where she was, I wouldn't be able to see her. I couldn't see it from the road. The only way is from above.
Nicole's father takes the tape of both psychic sessions to Detective Novak. The investigator is skeptical, but he's also reached a dead end.
I am not so naive to think that just because I don't have this special ability doesn't mean it wasn't given to someone else. No leads came, nothing. And it's not like we sat on our hands. I thought it doesn't hurt. Began checking all the areas that would resemble areas described by the psychic. There was an old railroad bridge, area where it was tall cattails, area where it was marshy land, ponds, lakes. We came up negative.
And then the detective remembers something else the psychic had said.
Have they tried a helicopter in any of those particular areas?
We're only 3 days into the investigation at this point, and I'm going to ask for a helicopter, because I felt I was going to meet with the resistance.
But the next day, Novak gets his helicopter. It's Thursday, June the 6th.
One of the pilots asked why we're using the state police helicopter. And I said, well, we're following the leads of a psychic with respect to a missing person. I'm saying to myself, oh, please, God, please let us find something. Because if we don't, I am never going to live this down.
5 minutes later, above a secluded marshy area, very similar to what the psychic visualized, they do spot something.
The pilot asked what type of vehicle we were looking for, and I explained to him it was a black Chevy we were looking for. At that point, he said, I think I see something down in the weeds right along the Raritan Bay. As the helicopter made several circles above it to find a landing spot where we could land the helicopter, you could see that there was, in fact, someone inside the vehicle.
But what they see from the air is not so easy to see on the ground.
Well, it was necessary to land on the beach area because of the tall cattails and debris. It was a landfill, maybe a mile square, just covered with cattails. You couldn't see anything. We each went in different directions, and as I approached this one curve, I was surprised because suddenly I saw the car, maybe 25 feet from the curve. The psychic indicated that you could be 25 feet from the car and not see it.
The psychic had also said that he had a bad feeling about Nicole, that she was dead.
Look in and I see the remains of what appeared to be a female. I noticed the position of her body. Car doors were locked. I radioed in the registration, confirmed that it was in fact Nicole's car.
Once we opened the door of the vehicle, she didn't appear to be seated behind the driver's seat, that she happened to be more in the center of the vehicle between the driver's and the passenger side, that the vehicle was still in gear and the ignition wasn't all the way on.
Inside, police find a letter in Nicole's purse, dated June 1st, the night she disappeared.
That appeared to be a semi-suicide note. Yet, there was no evidence that a suicide had occurred here.
I remember being happy that they found her. But it was like I wanted to pass out and I couldn't. I was like halfway, but you know.
My heart just ached for Pat and Jerry and Dylan.
The autopsy finds the cause of death acute morphine toxicity, a heroin overdose. The county prosecutor rules her death a suicide, but was it?
It didn't make any sense to me that she would do that.
It doesn't add up for the detectives either. First, there's Nicole's letter found in her purse.
The ink on a date was a different color than the body of the letter, and I thought that was strange.
Her mother confirms that Nicole often recorded her feelings, however dark.
Nothing that went through her mind wasn't written down somewhere. Because she was living a dangerous life, and in case something happened, she wanted to make sure that people knew things, especially Dylan.
Then, the location of the car.
And I kept in mind what Nicole's father had told me. She didn't like driving at night, and she would have to drive over discarded railroad ties and roofing material that was discarded in the area. There was no way that Nicole drove herself to this particular location, especially at night. Somebody had to have driven her car there.
And some of the things that really stood out were what wasn't there. No drug paraphernalia, there was no needles, no syringes, other than a ligature on the floor.
And then Detective Novak remembers what the psychic said on the tape. Nicole was not alone when she died.
There's at least 2 or 3 of them. They were there. They know what happened.
There was more to this than suicide. "22-year-old Nicole Roas has been found dead inside her car, abandoned in a secluded New Jersey marsh. It's ruled a suicide, but a psychic says others were involved, and the lead detective thinks so too." Anyone reading that letter could easily draw the logical conclusion that this was a suicide. However, they didn't have the information that I had. Her boyfriend, on the first day of the investigation, referred to Nicole in the past tense. The position of her body, the fact that the car was locked.
Most families, once a loved one commits suicide, kind of realize after looking back that the signs of suicide were there. They were depressed or they were having some type of problem. The parents were pretty insistent that they didn't believe that Nicole had taken her own life. And if she did in fact do that, then the crime scene would have been totally different. Usually when you die from a heroin overdose, the death is pretty instantaneous to the injection. There isn't time to remove the syringe from the vehicle, clean up the papers, dust off the dashboard, and make the car kind of neat. If you're going to inject yourself, you probably would have the car in park. The vehicle had actually been left in gear. If she had been, say, trying to leave the scene and all of a sudden the overdose kicked in and killed her, then that vehicle would have run out of gas before the police found her. Yet once we put the vehicle in neutral and turned the key on, it started right up. The suicide note was folded up in her pocketbook. You would probably leave it out in the vehicle. So everything that seemed to be a suicide just didn't seem to be adding up.
If she didn't commit suicide, how did she die? Novak suspects Todd Connors, Eric Nordling, and her boyfriend, Mike Reed.
Couldn't imagine why people I suspected would do such a thing to a friend.
For the detectives, there seems to be only one answer.
Under New Jersey law, if you cause someone's death by giving them a narcotic, it's technically a homicide.
I brought in the people involved. Got nowhere.
The case is officially closed, but for Novak, it's still open.
Sometimes it's better to take a step back, let the people involved come to the belief that they got away with something, and they begin to talk and tell friends.
Over the next 3 months, his strategy starts to pay off.
Just as much as I was repulsed by what had happened to Nicole, the friends of Eric, Todd, and Mike Reed were just as repulsed, because we began getting information through informants with respect to what is being said. Mike Reed shot up Nicole, and she OD'd, and he dumped her out in the landfill.
That information wouldn't have been admissible in court because it's hearsay.
To have any chance of charging Mike Reed, they need confessions from the people who were with Nicole when she died. They keep waiting.
After the call was processed at police headquarters, it was parked outside for the longest period of time. And every time I left police headquarters, I would look over at the car and I would say, "Come on, Nicole, help me out here." I repeated that probably 100 times.
For the next 3 months, the case eats away at the detective until one December night.
I was serving warrants at an apartment complex, totally unrelated to this, and I find this necklace. It was a child's necklace, the name Nicole.
Although it's not Nicole's necklace, the detective sees it as a sign.
And I thought, this is Nicole's response to me. Maybe it's time that I bring these people in and talk to them again.
But Mike Reed is in jail on an unrelated charge. So Novak brings in his friends, Eric Nordling and Todd Connors.
Eric was the first one to go in because we felt he was the weakest link. Sergeant Burns made Eric aware that he was familiar with Eric's family. His family would be disappointed with what they had done with Nicole. At that point, Eric tears up. Eric began to tell.
But Todd Connors admits to nothing.
I just confronted him. I yelled at him. This is what you do to her? You leave her there and rot? And he just looked away. We knew he had him. But he said he didn't want to talk anymore.
Novak needs statements from both Connors and Nordling in order to charge Mike Reed with Nicole's death. A few weeks later, he gets his chance. He brings Todd Connors in on a contempt of court warrant from a nearby town. But this time, he ups the ante. Novak brings in an investigator from the county prosecutor's office. She threatens to charge Connors with obstruction if he doesn't talk. It's Connors' last chance, and it works. Todd finally corroborates what Eric Nordling has already admitted, and what the psychic saw 6 months earlier, that Nicole was not alone when she died. According to their statements, around 8 p.m. on June 1st, 1996, Nicole, Todd, Eric, and Mike Reed head out to buy drugs. A half hour later in Perth Amboy, Nicole cashes her welfare check. At 9 p.m. in Newark, Mike Reed buys heroin. At a rest stop off the Garden State Parkway, Eric and Todd shoot up. Mike Reed shoots up Nicole. Todd and Eric fall asleep. When they come to, they're at the landfill, and Nicole is unconscious. Unable to revive her, they panic. But Mike Reed shows them the letter, the one the police initially took as a suicide note. He wipes down the car, removes all the evidence, and locks the doors. All three walk the 2 miles back to Todd Connors' house.
She would have never done that to them. That's what bothered me. Never. Even if she had to be found guilty, she would have never done that.
On December 16, 1996, Michael Reed is charged with the drug-induced death of Nicole Roas. He pleads guilty and is sentenced to 10 years in prison. Todd Connors and Eric Nordling walk free. Obstruction charges against them are dropped in exchange for their statements.
We had nothing. We found Nicole based on the information supplied to us by the psychic, Frank St. James. And that's it. I don't see how anyone could dispute it.
I can't explain it, nor would I even attempt to. I would certainly not have a problem with talking to a psychic or talking to the devil himself if it would help us solve some of our unsolved crimes.
I've done hundreds of cases. This was particularly gratifying, I guess, too, and sad at the same time, but I felt I helped the family at least.
Nothing goes right forever. There's no closure. You never see them again. She didn't have a normal funeral. None of it was the same. Everything was messed up.
This time on Psychic Investigators. When a college student vanishes, everyone's looking.
None of her friends had any information, had no idea where Kim Antanakis was.
Then, a psychic sees a twisted plot.
I knew there were men. I knew they were waiting for her. I could feel the ropes.
And says she's in grave danger.
They say she played in the sandbox that she didn't belong in.
Can the psychic help to solve the mystery of what happened to Kim Antanakis?
I knew she was alive, and I knew they had to find her right away.
Brooklyn, New York. In 1995, the borough suffers more than its fair share of the city's long tradition of crime and violence. A place where sometimes innocent people get hurt. It's nearly 4 a.m. on March 1st. After a night out in Manhattan, 20-year-old college student Kim Antanakis drops her friend, Liz Pace, at her apartment in Canarsie. Then drives a few blocks to her own apartment. Later that day, Kim's dad gets a call. Kim is a no-show at her part-time job. It's totally out of character. Tommy Antanakis immediately calls Kim's friends. No one has seen her.
Tommy came into the precinct shortly after not being able to get in contact with his daughter. I think it was about a day. And he had come into the 69th precinct in Canarsie to make a missing persons report.
Generally, the police wait 24 hours to investigate a missing person. But this time, they move fast.
I don't know. Something just said, run with this one. I don't have a good feeling about this case.
Detective Phil Turcola is on duty that day.
I reported to the missing persons squad, and I started to open up a case and investigate this myself.
Pretty and vivacious, Kim is popular and has a wide circle of friends. An only child, her parents are divorced. Her father, a successful businessman, lives close by. Her mother, in Florida.
Kimberly was a sweet girl, but naive. She had a little fire. She was a lot of fun. She was. She had a good way about us. She had a generous heart.
Detective Turcola suggests Tommy check Kim's parking spot for her car.
And then he called me, and he says, I think you need to come here. I found something. Her car was not there, but there was an earring on the garage floor. Don't know if that earring was there, fell out of a car, if she was wearing it, but I realized one person would know if she was wearing it, and that'd be Liz Pace.
Kim's friend Liz Pace confirms Kim was wearing both earrings the previous night.
Now I know that the car was in that garage, Kim was out of the car, and that earring fell off. I knew she was a victim of a crime. There was no doubt in my mind.
The detective's first thought is that Kim may have been carjacked.
I immediately put an alarm out over the NYPD's internal computer system, describing her to be on the lookout. I got in contact with the Aviation Bureau, and I asked them to look at the spots where cars are normally dumped.
Oh, we were out there, nonstop. I guess the adrenaline kicks in. Sleep don't matter.
I live on Long Island. Every night that I left Canarsie, I drive through parts of East New York, which are known auto stripping parts. People steal cars, auto strip them, and dump them. Cars are recovered all the time in certain desolate parts of Brooklyn.
But Detective Turcola finds nothing. Later that day, when Kim's father arrives home, his answering machine is flashing. But there are no messages. Curiously, someone has phoned and hung up twice. The police check morgues and hospitals. Nothing. They speak to Kim's friends and neighbors and to the couple staying at Kim's place, Joshua Torres and April Dedali.
None of her friends had any information, had no idea where Kim Antanakis was.
2 days pass with no sign of Kim. Her mother, Marlene, arrives from Florida. A family friend suggests that Marlene sees psychic Ellie Crystal.
A woman called me, quite hysterical actually, and she asked for a reading. She had to have it that night. It was an emergency. This was Kim's mom, Marlene, who had called me.
Host of her own local cable show, Crystal calls herself a medium. She says spirits come to her from the bridge outside her window.
I realized after I lived here for a while that it's almost like harmonics. The two end posts are like tuning forks, and the cables represent the harmonics. Spirits seem to be very drawn and attracted to the bridge. And it's just kind of became like a dimensional doorway for me.
2 days after Kim's disappearance, her mother Marlene arrives with one of her daughter's friends at Ellie Crystal's Brooklyn apartment.
They showed me a picture. I started seeing images. I knew she was alive, and I knew they had to find her right away.
Kim Antanakis has been missing for 3 days. Brooklyn police suspect foul play, but they have no real leads. Her mother asks a psychic for help. Ellie Crystal says her daughter is alive, but in grave danger. The psychic channels the young woman's spirit and tries to pinpoint her location.
To go into her body is to feel very cold and very chilled. Her whole energy was very weak and fading. I felt she was dehydrated. She has not eaten, and that if somebody didn't find her very soon, she would die.
Ellie Crystal says she can see what the police already suspect, that Kimberly has been abducted.
I feel that she made an attempt to escape, but they got her. You could feel that, you know, she had been taken as a prisoner. You could feel the ropes, and there was definitely this feeling of being tied up. I also felt that whoever was involved in this abduction knew her very well. I knew they were men. I knew they were waiting for her. This is kids who are getting either back at her or looking to get some money from the family. It was one or the other. Marlene was crying. She started to cry right away. The whole thing was an extremely emotional reading.
Before the session closes, the psychic has one more cryptic clue.
The letter J was a letter that came to me at the time. I saw it as children would write their letter J. It was connected to the person who had taken her. It came as a male and young and Brooklyn.
Marlene promises to pass on the paranormal clues to the police. But first, back at Kim's apartment, friends and family have gathered to listen to the psychic's tape.
I see her
Tied up. Abducted. The letter J. Suddenly, Kim's roommate Josh Torres and his friend Julio Negron jump to their feet. They say that they're going out to search for Kim. At 3 that morning, a fire crew responds to a fire in an empty house on 86th Avenue in Woodhaven, Queens. The flames are easily checked. But in the basement, a grim discovery. A half-charred human body. The long hair suggests it's a woman.
There was a remnants of a chair. The body was burnt beyond recognition.
Queens homicide detective Louis Pia was assigned to the case.
She had no shoes on. She was partially bound with her hands behind her back, and her feet were bound with duct tape.
Arson investigators established the fire was set intentionally with gasoline. The coroner's report reveals the woman was burned alive.
We started making calls. We had a body, and we wanted to see if people had reported anybody missing. So we called the missing persons squad. We were told that there was 2 individuals, one of which was a female in the 6-9 precinct who was reported missing a few days earlier by her father.
And that's when the phone rang. And it was Queens. And they had said they had a female deceased, victim of a homicide that fit the description of Kim Antanakis.
A description that includes some unique body art.
Kimberly Antanakis had some very distinctive tattoos on her back, on her leg.
The tattoos. An infinity sign. A scorpion. It's almost certainly Kim Antanakis.
I got Tommy sitting at my desk, and I walked out. I couldn't even look at Tom. I went into another office, and I sat there. My week came to a screeching halt. And my worst fears came true. I just couldn't bring myself to go back out and talk to Tom. I knew I had to, so I did. And he's like, what's going on? I said, you know, Tom, I said, there's some guys going to come in here and talk to you in a couple of minutes. That was it. My case ended. Case closed.
So we took a ride over to the 6-9 precinct. It was very difficult to tell him that we had a body that was burned beyond recognition, and we're going to need dental records to positively confirm that the individual was his daughter.
A missing person case is now a homicide investigation. A 21-year-old New York woman missing for 3 days has been found dead, burned alive. A psychic says the letter J is connected to her killer. When the brutal crime hits the headlines, even jaded New Yorkers are outraged.
Your mind starts playing games. You get angry. You want to look for the people that did it.
They tied her up in this cold basement, totally dark, and just left her there.
Pete Donahue covers the story for the New York Daily News.
It was a very normal neighborhood. I mean, it's not a neighborhood that you would drive through and expect something like this to happen at all. Just, nice, modest, middle-class homes. And the neighbors were shocked that something like this could happen.
Weeks go by. Though the police have several suspects on their radar, they don't have enough evidence for an arrest. The psychic was right about the abduction, about Kim being tied up and close to death. Could she help the police to find the killer?
Tom Antanakis would call on a daily basis, and he would say, listen, guys, if nothing is going on and you have nothing at this point in time, would you go see a psychic? I shouldn't talk for anyone else, but my assumption was that it was all, full of baloney. But I couldn't tell Tom.
Tommy called and he said that Marlene was impressed with the information I had given her and could he come by with 2 police officers. And I said, absolutely, no problem.
On the following Saturday, Tommy, his brother Joey, Detective Pia and his partner visit Ellie Crystal.
Crystal balls, I don't believe in them. Well, Tommy's motivation was to find out what happened, and whatever it took, whether it took seances or a crystal ball, he would do it to my brother.
One of the policemen, the one sitting closer to me, he asked a lot of questions. This is when Kim started coming to me.
She told us that there were 4 individuals involved in the homicide. She said that she saw the letter J as being the first letter of the names of the individuals involved. She kept seeing the letter J.
The letter J resonates with the police. Joshua Torres, who is temporarily staying with Kim with his wife and baby, is a suspect, as are his friends Jose Negron and Julio Negron, who despite their names are not related. Another friend of Torres, Nicholas Libretti, goes by the street name Little J. 4 suspects, 4 men whose names start with J, one of whom was living in Kim's apartment.
What do you look for? Justice? Vengeance? So many things go through your mind.
I mean, this was front-page news. It was shocking and puzzling, and it was very difficult for people to come to grips with what happened. People were petrified. They didn't know, who was walking down their sidewalk in the middle of the night,
Despite the psychic's clues, It seems the police are no closer to closing the murder case. Weeks, then months pass. Then, on September 6, 1995, 6 months after Kim Antanakis disappeared, the police catch a major break. Friends of Joshua Torres, the guy who was temporarily staying at Kim's apartment, say he's been bragging about her murder.
And I got a call from the detective, and he basically said to me, listen, I got this girl and guy in here, and they're alleging that this guy Joshua Torres, confessing that he burned Kimberly Antanakis, abducted her for a ransom and so on, and gave all the particulars. From that point on, the investigation started to go full force.
First, the police bring Joshua's friend Julio Negron in for questioning, and he eventually cracks.
We interviewed him at great length, and he actually confessed, and he agreed to cooperate with the district attorney's office. And then from there, we went and we grabbed Joshua and Nick Libretti simultaneously on the same day.
Torres, the roommate, denies everything. But Nick Libretti, faced with Julio Negron's confession, also cracks. Between them, they reveal a kidnapping scheme that went very, very wrong.
All they had to do was just ask. We both would have gave anything to have her back.
Involved were Joshua Torres, Nicholas Libretti, a.k.a. Little J, Julio Negron, and Jose Negron, all J's, just as the psychic predicted.
This was just animals that were fools and they were idiots.
The trial of Joshua Torres, the ringleader, opens on November 1st, 1996. He pleads innocent.
Josh Torres is a particularly twisted and grotesque personality. He's an evil individual.
Gene Reevestein prosecutes the case.
I believe Josh thought she was a good target for ransom demand because he could tell, one, that she had a lot of resources, and two, that her family cared for her. The way he looked at it there's money there and there's affection there. And those are two things Josh knows. Well, to get one, he knows how to use the other.
Torres, who already had a criminal record, easily roped his friends into a scheme. The prosecution argues that at approximately 4 a.m. on March 1st, 1995, as Kim Antanakis parked her car in the garage across from her Brooklyn apartment, Nicholas and Jose grabbed her and drove her to a vacant home in Queens. There, they tied her up in the basement with no heat, no food, and no water, and left her for 3 days. Joshua Torres phoned Kim's father twice to play a pre-recorded ransom demand. But, by accident, he played the ransom tape too early for it to be recorded. Later, when Joshua and Julio heard the recording of the psychic session, they panicked, thinking she was onto them. That same night, they drove over to Queens, planning to set Kim free. But after 3 days in the cold without food and water, she was comatose. The cruel, bungling gang assumed she was dead. Joshua decided to burn the evidence.
These guys, Torres and Libretti, had absolutely no remorse. I mean, you got the sense that they just looked like at other people like bugs. You know, they had no feeling, they had no sense of value of life.
The jury hears that just as Joshua Torres lit the fatal match, he whispered to Kim, "Life sucks." Despite the evidence, Joshua denies all the charges. But the jury thinks otherwise.
And Tommy said he didn't want the death penalty for these guys. He wanted them to suffer as long as possible.
And he should rot in jail for the rest of his life, and he should never come out.
Joshua Torres is convicted of arson, kidnapping, and first-degree murder, and sentenced to 58 years. As for Nicholas Libretti, or Little J, He's also sentenced to 58 years, but dies in prison of AIDS less than 2 years later. A year later, in November 1996, Julio Negron is sentenced to 6 years as an accessory because he did nothing to stop the crime. Jose Negron never gets to trial, as in June 1995, he was gunned down on a street in Queens. From the beginning, the psychic seemed to key in so clearly to Kim and her killers.
One of the things from Ellie's reading that I was present at that was astonishing was that she was right on the money with the letter J. I mean, you had Joshua, you had Julio, you had Jose Negron, okay? And you also had an individual that we were looking at in the investigation that was known as Little J.
I think there are psychics out there that are good at what they do. I think they do have that extra sense. It's kind of like an enhanced gut feeling.
The last time I saw Tommy, he told me that everything had been taken care of. There was a feeling with Tommy of completion, that whatever this whole scenario was that involved his daughter's kidnapping and murder and the capturing of the criminals, it had come to a conclusion already. It was over. After that, I knew I wasn't going to see Tommy again.
It was hard after. That was Daddy's little girl. 100%. She had him wrapped. Can't put it any better than that. That was his heart.
Tommy went to Kimberly's grave regularly. I mean, he went there on her birthday. He went there on holidays. He invited me to come after one of the verdicts. And he went and he said, you know, we did it, baby. We got that piece of garbage.
In 2005, 10 years after his daughter's grisly death, Tommy dies of cancer.
I think in the end, he felt he had nothing to live for. He died of a broken heart.
This time on Psychic Investigators. In small-town Maryland, a chicken farmer vanishes.
We have searched the whole county. We couldn't find nothing. We didn't know what was going on.
It's a mystery, even to the police.
Maybe she was not missing but had become the victim of foul play.
Until a rookie psychic takes the case.
I said, it feels like something just hit me in the head.
And uncovers a secret no one could imagine. Amid the farmland of Maryland's eastern shore lies the close-knit community of Berlin. In 1991, a sleepy place where family ties run deep, and so do their secrets. July 29th, and 55-year-old chicken farmer Mildred Louise Williams, known to friends and family as Miss Louise, says goodbye to her elderly mother and leaves for her cleaning job in nearby Ocean City. Miss Louise tells her mother she'll be back at noon. She's never seen again. Miss Louise's brother and sister-in-law, Robert and Nettie Moxley, will never forget that day.
When she didn't come home, Granny called Dawn. Dawn said, oh, we'll check around. She's probably gone somewhere running around, Mom. Don't worry about it.
Dawn is Miss Louise's 32-year-old daughter who lives nearby with her son and her husband Billy. Dawn doesn't seem too worried, but Granny Moxley is. Miss Louise is never late.
If she told you she was going to be there, she was there.
At 7:30 that night, Dawn turns up at the farm with Miss Louise's red truck. She tells her grandmother she found it in the parking lot of the supermarket. Dawn says her mother is probably out drinking, and she doesn't want her driving under the influence. By midnight, there's still no word from the missing woman. Granny Moxley convinces her granddaughter to call the police.
She said, Dawn, if you don't call the cops, I'm calling them. And so Dawn did call the police, but she told them that this is my crazy grandmother. My mother's run off with a man, and my grandmother's just hysterical. It's okay.
The police aren't overly worried either. Miss Louise is a recent widow, fun-loving, and someone who likes to party.
She played. We all do. She loved to drink once in a while.
Everybody remembers parties with her. She was always joking around.
But Miss Louise's siblings believe something is wrong. The day she went missing, a family vacation was planned. And Miss Louise never misses a party.
I know it wasn't like my sister to take off, like that, 2 or 3 days without calling.
2 days after she vanished, the Moxley siblings, Dale, Robert, and Nettie, head to Berlin to see what they can find out about their sister. The first thing they notice is the truck that Dawn drove home from the grocery store.
And the vehicle had just been washed, they say. It was so clean. It said to me something was wrong there.
In Miss Louise's house, another clue that something is not right.
She had a safe in there with a lot of money in it. Safe was open and wasn't no money in it.
News of an empty safe is enough to get the police over to the farm, but not enough to change their mind about Miss Louise.
I was pretty much convinced at that point in time she may have been with someone and been off drinking, so forth.
Trooper Paul Frick worked the missing persons case.
So at the point, we didn't have any reason to believe anything other than the lady was missing due to her own reasons rather than foul play.
But the police do issue a missing persons report across the state. Sergeant Bill Gordy worked the case from nearby Wicomico County.
I was aware of the case. It had gotten quite a bit of notoriety, and we had had a small role in just tracking down leads of potential sightings and that sort of thing.
But every lead comes to nothing. The Moxleys take matters into their own hands.
We called hospitals. We called nursing homes. We walked the woods. I think we have searched the whole county, but we couldn't find nothing. We didn't know what was going on.
It seemed like I wanted to just turn everything upside down just to find her, but you couldn't. You just kept running into dead ends.
Dawn and Billy even appear on television, tearfully asking viewers for any news of Miss Louise.
Please come home or call.
Yeah. Right there.
A few days after Miss Louise disappears, her brother Dale Moxley stumbles on a magazine story about Deborah Heinecker, a Maryland psychic. She has been praised for locating Vader, a search and rescue dog gone missing from the Canine Police Unit in Montgomery County. Dale calls the family immediately.
And I just said, maybe this is how we could, get some help here.
Deborah Heinecker, a former computer programmer, is new to the world of psychic investigation.
I can focus on a subject or something that belongs to the victim. That's when I start to get the pictures, or sometimes I will hear sounds. I will allow myself to be the victim so that I can get a better picture of exactly what happened to them in their final moments.
The psychic agrees to come to Berlin, but first, she asks the family to send her a photograph of Miss Louise, along with some of her personal items.
I started to tune in, and the numbers 335 came to me. I saw a white horse. It also came to me that Miss Louise was getting ready to go on some sort of vacation. I clearly saw a building, and I made the angle of the metal roof.
3 days later, when the Moxleys pick up the psychic at the airport, they're not prepared for what she asks them.
I read the numbers and I said, "Do these numbers mean anything to anyone?"
She said 335. My brother-in-law said that's Don's and Billy's address.
When Mildred Miss Louise Williams disappears from her home in Berlin, Maryland, the police suspect she's gone on a bender. But a psychic sees a set of numbers, and that arouses suspicion.
She said 335. That's Don's and Billy's address.
Could Miss Louise's daughter and son-in-law have something to do with her disappearance?
They had got in a fuss 2 weeks before because Louise had told him that she had changed her will.
Dawn and Billy had recently stopped Miss Louise from seeing her grandchild. In retaliation, Miss Louise threatened to disinherit them.
After my sister disappeared, Billy Warren would never look me in the eye. Deep in your hearts, you have a funny feeling.
With Dawn and Billy present, the Moxleys say nothing. But what about her other visions? The vacation.
We planned a family reunion in North Carolina for a week. Every one of the Moxleys were going to meet. We were all going to, go on vacation.
But the white horse and the metal roof are a mystery. The Moxley siblings drive the medium to Billy and Dawn's farm, the very address she saw in her vision.
We went to Dawn and Billy's house, and there was this white horse in the fence right alongside the road near their house. It was spooky.
Still unaware of the siblings' own suspicions, the psychic becomes uneasy as she nears the house. She takes Nettie Moxley aside.
When I had her a bit to herself, I basically said, "I'm afraid of Billy, so don't leave me alone with him." And she agreed. I think she had no intention of leaving me alone with him.
They enter the house and go into the kitchen.
When Deborah got to the kitchen, she got a terrible headache. She felt a terrible pain.
I said, "It feels like something just hit me in the head."
I think she creeped Billy out. She worried him a lot.
I started feeling as if Billy and Dawn didn't want me in their house. They were being very fidgety, and they were trying to hurry me out. So we go outside, and there's this dirt path. And I said, "I want to walk down this little dirt road." The same radar that knew that Vader was in the woods, it was that sort of radar. It just pulls me. And Billy did not want me to go down that road. He said, "You don't want to go down there. That place is full of snakes." So that was enough to deter me from going back there.
The psychic's intuition matches the siblings' growing suspicions. They believe Billy and Dawn are hiding something. But what? Deborah Heinecker returns to Catonsville, Maryland, but she's not finished with Miss Louise yet. Over the next few weeks, she continues to experience strange, extrasensory flashes.
I was hearing the buzzsaw, and I felt as if I had been pushed into almost quicksand, like I was being pulled down and the mud was just coming into my mouth, coming into my face, just being covered with mud, and that I was going to drown there. It was very frightening.
A buzzsaw, drowning in mud. Is Deborah Heinecker looking for a missing person or a dead body? Her psychic intuition tells her Miss Louise may have been murdered. She makes a difficult phone call to Nettie Moxley.
I said, I don't want to start trouble in the family, but I said, I felt that perhaps Dawn's husband, Billy, had killed Miss Louise and buried her either in or next to the pond behind their house. Her response was that they believed that also, but they needed me to help them prove it.
But proving it is easier said than done. Billy is an upright, church-going member of the community, not your typical murder suspect.
Mr. Warren had a stable and positive life. He had a nice job, a home, a family.
The Moxley siblings pass along the psychic's unnerving visions to the police, but they fall upon deaf ears. They still believe the most likely scenario is that Miss Louise has run off with a drinking buddy.
I've never believed in psychics. I've never believed in the supernatural. I've only ever believed the living are the people that can hurt you, not the dead. People that say they can tell you things that have happened or are going to happen, I just never had much faith in that.
As the weeks pass, the psychic and the Moxleys increasingly think Miss Louise is dead, and Billy is the killer. But without a body or hard evidence, they can't persuade the police to ramp up the investigation.
You can't arrest someone on a whim or what you think happened. You have to be able to prove what you're accusing someone of. If that's the case, as I felt at the time, but couldn't prove anything more, I couldn't in good conscience do anything different than what I was doing. I didn't have enough evidence.
The police won't forge ahead on the word of a psychic, but Miss Louise's family can, and does.
She just made our search even stronger. She made our will stronger. And it just gives us extra strength as a family to go search even harder.
3 months after she vanished, the case is given new life. Sergeant Bill Gordy is transferred to the Berlin Police Department from nearby Wicomico County.
My gut told me that there were elements of the investigation that needed to be refocused, and that maybe she was not missing but had become the victim of foul play.
In Berlin, Maryland, local chicken farmer Mildred Miss Louise Williams is missing. Her siblings and a psychic suspect her daughter and son-in-law. With a new detective on the case, their suspicions are suddenly taken seriously.
We met with the Moxleys and tried to work out something with them that would be a cooperative type effort in the investigation.
Miss Louise's sister, Nettie Moxley, calls Deborah Heinecker with the news. And detectives drop their earlier skepticism and begin consulting with the psychic regularly by phone.
I view a psychic as much the same as an investigative aid as, say, a polygraph. It can many times put pressure on a person, and since we didn't have a lot of active leads to pursue, it was believed that this might well present one of those situations.
There wasn't a day that went by that I didn't think of Billy and that case, and basically how I was going to get him.
Not only do the psychic and the Moxleys have their sights set on the grieving daughter and son-in-law, now the police start watching Dawn and Billy more carefully.
We did try to ratchet up the attention on him to let them know that we were more closely scrutinizing their current and past statements and behavior.
Billy Warren has been acting strangely, nervous, edgy, short-tempered.
He was just not a cool, calm, collected person.
Finally, the police ask Billy and Dawn to take a polygraph. They agree, and on December 12, 1991, the tests are scheduled.
Billy said Dawn's not going to take the polygraph, and then after just a brief conversation, himself elected not to. He developed a difficulty speaking. He was almost incoherent. He was obviously very frightened, very upset, very unnerved by the entire experience. It was obvious that there was more on his mind than just the refusal of a polygraph test.
I think he knew the door was coming shut on him. The pieces were there. It was only a matter of time.
For the police, refusing to take a polygraph is a red flag. But it's still not enough to make a move.
We had a lot of conjecture. We had a lot of, this doesn't add up, this doesn't look right, but physical evidence to tie him to a crime, zero.
Maybe that physical evidence can be found where the psychic had been telling them all along.
I told the police that I felt that she was in mucky soil, and Billy and Dawn had that pond right back there, and I had been drawn there originally, so I wanted them to go there.
But finally, I asked the investigators that were currently working on the case to go out to Mr. Warren's house.
There, two of the investigators head towards the pond, while Trooper Frick waits outside. Suddenly, the door opens and Billy calls out to him. Billy has something to say.
He just literally fell to pieces in front of me and started confessing.
5 months after she vanished, the terrible mystery of what happened to the chicken farmer is solved. Billy says on July 29th, Miss Louise came over to visit. He was alone. They argued over Dawn's inheritance. Miss Louise threatened to disinherit Dawn once again.
He became enraged. There was a claw hammer there. He'd been doing some home repairs. He picked up the hammer and swung it, struck her in the head.
He says she fell, and he tried to get her off the carpet pretty quick. He didn't want her to mess the carpet up.
He buried Miss Louise in the mud next to the pond behind his house, washed her truck, and drove it to the grocery store parking lot.
It was meant to be found as though she was there and left it, like meeting someone.
Later, when the psychic nearly stumbled on Miss Louise's burial spot, Billy panicked, dug his mother-in-law up, dismembered her with a buzzsaw, and reburied her under the floorboards of his woodshed. A woodshed with a slanted metal roof. Billy goes on to say that his wife had no knowledge of the crime. The murder weapon and the body are later recovered, as is evidence of blood spatter in the couple's home, corroborating the confession and the psychic's vision.
Miss Louise evidently had been bludgeoned in their kitchen. And when they pulled up the rug, they found her blood under the rug exactly where I was standing when I said that I felt that I had been hit in the head.
Billy Warren is sentenced to 20 years in prison for the murder of Mildred Louise Williams. Then, Billy drops a bombshell. He reveals his wife Dawn helped him to cover up the murder. She's charged as an accessory and sentenced to 5 years. In a cruel twist of fate, Dawn receives her mother's inheritance on her release.
She knowed what happened from day one, you know, from the first minute.
You gotta realize you're being torn apart from love and hate. You love someone and they've done something to hurt one of your family members. Now there's hate over here pulling that apart.
It's your mother. I mean, she gave you life. And you can cut her up and put her in the woods and walk out that door and go to church every Sunday morning looking over in those woods. And knowing your mother's over there, buried?
The police credit Deborah Heinecker with pushing Billy over the edge and into the arms of the law.
I personally believe she played a pivotal role. I would like to think we could have done it without her. However, that's not the case. Her predictions were the key to causing him to confess.
When he confessed, he said that he wasn't afraid of all the Moxleys. He wasn't afraid of the police. He was afraid of me because he knew I was going to get him.
To put it bluntly, I think she's the reason the case was solved. So if someone asked me today what I think of psychics, I'd have to say that I have changed my views completely and I'd listen to a psychic.
Deborah Heinecker also turned the Moxleys into believers.
I thought she was super. As far as I'm concerned, she can walk on water now. It's like she turned the lights on to everything. We were all in the dark till she came along.
I've never believed in psychics. I don't know much about them, but I know that she was right on and she helped us.
I actually felt that justice was going to be served for Miss Louise. I felt that Miss Louise deserved to have that confession.
The Moxleys have never gotten over it.
She was a good friend. If you needed her, she was there. She should have had a peaceful death. I just miss her.
This time on Psychic Investigators. In Maryland, a promising young Harvard grad vanishes.
This 23-year-old woman had just disappeared.
Everyone fears the worst.
We have a pillowcase that came from our house, stained in blood. And right away, you know that something bad has happened here.
Then a psychic's cryptic visions open the door.
The person that I envisioned absolutely hated Laura.
To a world of insanity and terror.
It is the strangest, most bizarre case that I have ever worked on.
Bethesda, Maryland, an affluent suburb just minutes from Washington, D.C. Home to movers and shakers, professionals and politicians. Home to 23-year-old Harvard graduate Laura Hotling, who's just moved back in with her mother and landed a job at a PR firm. But on the morning of October 19th, 1992, Laura doesn't show up at work. Her co-workers call. No reply. One of them is a good friend. Concerned, she phones Laura's brother.
Laura was extremely responsible, and she was very considerate, so she would have called, and I was quite sure of that. I knew something was strange.
Warren Hotling, a teacher, heads over to his mother's house to check. His sister isn't home. By nightfall, there's still no sign of Laura. Increasingly worried, he calls the police. Sergeant Rich Fallon was on duty that night.
The police took the report, and nothing was done for at least a day. You give them 24, 48 hours to show back up, then after that, you start getting concerned.
Their mother, Penny Hotling, is away at a conference. When Warren calls her, she cuts her trip short and returns home.
Because the police weren't able to do anything, we wanted to do something. We were convinced that there was something going on, there was something wrong. And so a lot of Laura's friends got real active. They put together a poster. It was very important to us to try to get, information out there so we could find something out.
Laura Hotling's disappearance is big news in Bethesda.
In the upper crust homes, a crime or a missing person is rare. especially in a family like the Hotlings, where you have a daughter who went to Harvard, the mother is a psychotherapist. Crimes like that just don't happen in those kind of families.
Adrian Havel writes about the story.
Laura was virtually the all-American girl. She had everything going for her.
She was very accomplished, a fantastic student. She was 6 feet tall, very long-limbed, and she had a really sweet smile.
After 2 days, there's still no word from Laura. The police launch a full-scale investigation, starting at her home.
There was nothing suspicious, nothing unusual, nothing disturbed in the house. Didn't appear to be any break-in.
The police canvass the neighborhood. Curiously, a neighbor's nanny tells them she saw the tall, slim blonde leaving for work at 8 a.m.
She said every day, Laura comes out of the house and waves to the children and her. And this day before, Laura had walked out of the house. She was wearing a trench coat and slacks, and nothing seemed unusual except for the fact that she didn't wave.
If Laura left home at 8 that morning, where is she now?
It really was baffling because this 23-year-old woman had just disappeared.
Harry Gearing handled the press for the Montgomery County Police.
You have to keep your mind wide open to any possibility. Did she have a boyfriend? Did she have some reason to run away? Was she running away from something? So you have to ask some difficult questions.
It was very, very uncomfortable to not know what was going on. Part of you says, don't make things up. All we know right now is we don't know where she is. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. But I didn't have any kind of explanation. And so that was frightening.
Police interview friends and family. They search local fields and woods. Then, 4 days after Laura's disappearance, a discovery that throws the investigation in a whole new direction. Half a mile from Laura's house, cadaver dogs uncover a bloody pillowcase.
The blood-stained pillowcase was not just your average kind. This was a high-dollar pillowcase. The normal person wouldn't have this in their house.
The police match the pillowcase to the linens at the Hotling home and send it to forensics.
This is still a missing person case officially because you still don't have concrete evidence to suggest that there's been a murder. But when you have bloody evidence, it really is very strongly suggesting foul play.
That was kind of a confirmation for me that something bad had happened, which I already felt pretty strongly was the case at the time. In fact, I remember it was a point of conflict with the police about what kind of investigation it was, whether it was a missing persons investigation or a homicide investigation.
The Bethesda community at first was more puzzled than fearful. But when reports began to show up on television about not only Laura being missing, but police crews finding blood, then they began to get worried.
4 days after she vanished, the blood-drenched pillowcase suggests something terrible has happened to Laura Hotling. But what? A local psychic, famous for locating the missing, claims she can help.
This psychic was known to the police because she helped us out in a previous case. I think it was in 1991. We had a police dog go on missing. And with the psychic's help, the officers were able to recover that dog. So when she approached us with information about the Laura Hotling case, I think the officers were willing to listen.
The picture I was seeing was of a woman, but her energy was very masculine. The person that I envisioned was very jealous of Laura, very jealous.
A week after 23-year-old Laura Hotling vanishes from her Maryland home, police have no idea whether she's alive or dead. A psychic offers to help. Deborah Heinecker claims to read energy from photographs and personal objects to help locate the missing.
I call it tuning in, and I basically remove everything from my mind, make my mind a blank slate, and then I focus on whatever it is.
A A police officer agrees to meet with the psychic to discuss the case. While holding the missing persons poster, the psychic sees a puzzling image.
I got a vision of someone in my mind. It was a woman, but it was very strange to me because she had a male energy, and the male energy was very strong, and I found that very confusing. The person absolutely hated Laura, and actually this person was very jealous of Laura, very jealous. I had visions of the person wrapping Laura in what looked to me to be a sheet or a comforter, and I felt that the person changed into Laura's clothes and carried her out. At that point, I felt relatively sure that Laura was no longer alive.
A woman with a man's energy, intense jealousy, and murder. Detectives agree Laura might be dead, but they're mystified by the psychic's strange visions.
Basically, what is that? What's a woman with a man's energy? And it really didn't fit in because we didn't believe it was a woman that did this. We believe it was a man that did this.
As the investigation gathers speed, lab testing confirms that it's Laura's blood on the pillowcase recovered in the woods.
That would indicate that something must have happened in the bedroom. So we then went into Laura's house and we stripped down the bed. And her mother mentioned that these sheets that are on the bed don't belong on this bed. These are for the guest bedroom. And there was no mattress pad. And we examined that mattress and there was no sign of blood.
Police opt to use a new chemical to look for blood.
Luminol reacts with the hemoglobin in the blood and it becomes luminescent. They sprayed it, turned out the lights, and that mattress glowed.
And it was like the 4th of July. All of this blood suddenly appeared, and we couldn't see it because the suspect had cleaned it up.
The police are now almost certain that Laura is dead, just as the psychic predicted.
What was told to us was that there was blood on the mattress and there was enough blood that a person could not have survived losing that much blood. So that was a confirmation that she was dead.
In all likelihood, Laura did not leave her home alive.
The idea that she had come out the next morning and was walking down the street did not match at all.
The neighbor's nanny, who said she saw Laura leave at 8 a.m. the morning of her disappearance, was clearly mistaken. But if it wasn't Laura, who was it?
You have a prominent young woman murdered in her home, so presumably there's a killer running loose. So there's a tremendous amount of pressure to find out who did it and catch him.
The police look again at everyone who might have seen Laura.
I talked to the mother, asking her about who hangs around here, who are her friends, and Laura Hotling's mother said, well, we can check with Haddon Clark.
Haddon Clark is the family gardener, a homeless man roughing it in the woods outside Bethesda. Laura's mother hired Haddon through a church rehab program and wants the police to leave him alone.
She said, he has psychological problems. I'm sure it's not him. He is not a violent person. And I would prefer that you not even think of him as a suspect.
Back at the station, Fallon briefs his superiors. The name Haddon Clark has a surprising effect on his captain.
And he immediately just said, oh my God.
Haddon Clark has a dark and twisted past. He's a paranoid schizophrenic with a string of disturbing arrests, including malicious destruction of property and theft. Worse, he was a suspect in the still unsolved disappearance of a little girl in Silver Spring, Maryland.
We brought in and talked to detectives that had interviewed him years before, and they told us, hey, look, you know, this guy is strange. I mean, he is odd, and he's very capable of doing this.
With the gardener now their #1 suspect, police start following Haddon Clark. But they can't arrest him. They don't have enough evidence to tie him to Laura's disappearance.
There was a point at which the police were suspicious of Haddon, and we were resistant to that, actually. We thought, oh, it could be Haddon. He's harmless.
And we caught holy hell over it. Laura Hotling's mother was furious that we were focusing in on him. It's not fair. He's a very gentle person. The minister at the church was furious and said, leave this man alone. Homeless advocates were calling the police department and raising hell that we were looking at this homeless man.
But then, more lab testing on the pillowcase reveals something highly incriminating. An impression of Haddon Clark's thumbprint in Laura Hotling's blood.
And our lieutenant at that time said, notify patrol throughout the county. We want this guy. Find him.
With this new evidence, the police arrest the gardener on suspicion of murdering the Ivy League grad.
We trusted Haddon, and we found out that that trust was misplaced, and that was very difficult.
But the question remains, where is Laura? 23-year-old Harvard grad Laura Hotling is set for a Washington law career when she disappears under suspicious circumstances. The family gardener, Haddon Clark, has been charged with her murder, but says nothing.
We have a bloody fingerprint and no body, and it's basically a circumstantial case. So there's people saying, you don't have enough to get a conviction, we need to release him.
At the bond hearing, prosecutors argue to keep Haddon Clark behind bars while they gather more evidence.
For me, what was wrong was that I didn't know what had happened to her, and arresting him didn't answer the question. There was what people thought had happened, but we didn't know where she was.
The police ramp up their search.
Montgomery County homicide detectives have drained ponds. They have dug into the earth. They have listened to psychics. They have done so, of course, to find Laura Hotling's body.
But nothing. Months go by. Haddon Clark's in custody, but still not talking.
To me, it was a paralyzing experience. I felt very helpless. I knew the police were doing what they could do, and you were just kind of waiting.
We knew in our hearts that Haddon Clark had murdered Laura. Proving it was going to be hard. We traveled up to Block Island, we went to Rhode Island, we went all over the place, anywhere he had been, and we were having a very, very hard time getting the evidence that we needed to close this case. And it was very difficult.
Police are at a dead end. But psychic Deborah Heinecker thinks she knows exactly where Laura is buried.
I felt it was relatively close to the campsite, and she was in a shallow grave in mucky, sort of peaty soil. Her nose was partially exposed, and maybe parts of her cheek and maybe a little of her forehead.
But the police aren't buying it. They've already searched around Haddon Clark's makeshift campsite repeatedly.
You're always going to have skeptics in the police. We're skeptical by nature, and the Montgomery County Police had searched that area over and over again, and they didn't believe that the body was there. But Deborah insisted to the police that they keep looking.
On June 13th, 1993, 8 months after Laura vanished, a startling turn of events.
Right the day before trial, the scientist has to review all of her findings. She looked at the hairbrush that had belonged to Laura Hotling and saw something odd and took off a strand of what she thought was hair that just didn't look quite like the others, and examined it, and it was a hair or fiber, as you might say, off a wig.
This lone fiber may be the final piece of the puzzle. An earlier search turned up a bizarre storage locker rented by Haddon Clark.
We went in, and it was stacked with plastic containers. There were high heels, there was ladies' underwear, ladies' dresses, there were wigs. Just the place was full of female clothing. Then we realized that Haddon was a cross-dresser.
Deborah Heinecker's vision begins to make sense.
I had the light bulb moment and said, oh, yes, that's what I had to have been feeling when I envisioned this person, but with a male energy.
The crime lab makes a positive match. Faced with the damning evidence that puts him at the murder scene, Haddon Clark confesses. In a dramatic twist, the next day the gardener agrees to lead police to Laura's body in exchange for a plea bargain. He takes them to the wooded area surrounding his camp near Bethesda. There, they make a grim discovery. Buried in a shallow grave, they find the remains of Laura Hotling.
It had been several months. The rains had washed up part of her body so that part of her body was now exposed and out of the ground.
It's just as the psychic had insisted all along.
Deborah's description of the grave site was very close to what it was. I mean, it was excellent.
Some of the police officers were surprised when Laura's body was found in that location because we thought we did a thorough search. We didn't see anybody there. So it's a mystery to me.
Being able to say I know something about where she is was very helpful for us in terms of having some chance at some kind of a closure and not just not knowing. The not knowing was very hard.
The man who killed Warren's sister had a troubled past.
Haddon Clark had a terrible childhood. His mother dressed him in women's clothes, or little girls' clothes, I should say, from the time he could walk.
We later learned that he liked to kill small animals.
He would shoot cats, kill dogs, put them on the neighborhood's doorstep if the neighbor crossed him.
This is the kind of person he is.
Little did Laura's mother know that the man she hired to help in her garden was a born killer. But why Laura?
Penny Hotling may have treated Haddon Clark, her gardener, her handyman, a lot like a son who came around and did odd jobs.
Haddon had become attached to Mrs. Hotling, thinking that, she was like a mother figure. What came up is that Laura had just recently returned from Harvard and had moved into the house.
He began to think of Laura as usurping him in the household. She was replacing him. Haddon may have thought Penny Hotling was his mother, but she wasn't. He was really, when it came down to it, the gardener and the handyman. And a rage did build up inside him, I believe.
With Haddon's confession, a full picture of a savage crime is finally revealed. In the early morning hours of October 19th, Haddon Clark let himself into the Hotling house. Wearing a blonde wig, he entered Laura's bedroom and woke her up.
She must have been in total terror when she saw him there, especially since he was wearing a wig.
Clark then bound her limbs with duct tape and suffocated her on the bed. He slashed her throat, rolled her up in the bloody bed sheets, and then stashed her body in his truck.
Then he came back to the house, cleaned up, replaced the sheets, made it look as normal as he could.
Haddon Clark then climbed into the bed, his transformation complete.
The next morning, he put on the wig and used her hairbrush to brush his hair, where we got the fiber from the wig.
At 8 a.m., he left the house with Laura's briefcase, dressed as a woman and wearing a wig. That's who the neighbor's nanny saw leaving. Later that same night, Haddon Clark buried Laura Hotling across the highway from his campsite.
For me, sadness was the predominant emotion at the time. And disbelief. Murder doesn't happen to people that I know. It doesn't happen to people I care about. And life isn't supposed to be this way. That was all changed for me.
With his plea of guilty to second-degree murder accepted,
Haddon Clark was sentenced to 30 years in prison for the murder of Laura Hotling. He later leads police to the remains of Michelle Dorr, the little girl he was suspected of murdering. He claims to have killed others, whose bodies have never been recovered. But the police have recovered Haddon's stash of trophies, including Laura Hotling's high school ring.
It is the strangest, most bizarre murder case that I have ever worked on.
The psychic in this case helped us out, so I'm open to using psychics. If she can help me, I'm very glad to take her help to help me close cases.
I don't think I fully appreciated the impact Laura had on other people's lives until she died. For her memorial service, it was a spectacular group of people, and they really, really loved my sister. And I was very touched by that. She's a beautiful person, and I miss her. I miss her.